There are three main ways to secure APIs, the first of which authentication, API keys, and also the OAuth authorization framework. They all have their own merits, but I'm going to choose authentication as it is the simplest to implement at this time and is very powerful. This is a video which is going to show API misusage and how we can access different users' data without actually being logged in due to a lack of authentication and authorization. So on the calendar page, we can inspect with Firefox and see how we are making API calls for the user Donny. And if we look on the header section, we can see we have our request URL, which is our API call. Now, if a hacker was to be able to see this, they knew the username of another user, then they would be able to put the username in here instead, and as a result, they'd be able to see the activities of other users. So I've got a demonstration of that here. If I'm logged in as Donny, I could change the username to Patient, who is another user, and I can see all of their activities, which obviously is a violation. Okay, so we have now implemented the fix. If we now try and access this API under the username Donny, we will be redirected to the login page. The page isn't loading correctly because we're currently using the VM without an internet connection. So the jQuery is not loading in. So if I try to log in as Patient, I will be directed to the calendar. If I try now to adjust the API to load Donny's activities, I will be given a forbidden status page 403. So if I'm not logged in, I will be redirected to the login page. And if I am logged in and attempt to access another user's data, then I will be given this forbidden 403 page. So we're now going to implement a fix to ensure that users are authenticated before they can use the APIs. And we're going to ensure that the users are also authorized to use certain APIs. So the first step with authentication is to create the web security config file. This is pretty simple to do, and I've also put a comment at the top of the file which shows a brilliant tutorial by Baildung. So as you can see, we're going to pass in our user details service, and we're going to override the configure method, the web security configure adapter. The below ant matches are routes that we will permit or assign certain roles to, and we will ensure that to access any of those requests, you will need to be authenticated. Any route which has the permit all method will be available without having to be authenticated. So things like our CSS, our JavaScript, our static pages, they can be served without authentication. Otherwise, any other requests such as our /API routes, the users will simply be redirected to the login page if they're not logged in. To authorize our API, we can take use of Spring's authentication class. So this will essentially allow us to get hold of the current session. So in another way, the current user logged in. So auth.getPrincipal will return us with the user. We can then check the user's username to ensure that the right user is accessing the correct data. So patient should not be able to access Donny's data or vice versa. From further research, there are also some other methods Spring provides for authorization. The one that I have now is the pre-authorize annotation, where you can quite simply attach an authority to a request mapping or a method. So the getPatients method, I have pre-authorized to give the role of GP. So should a patient or an administrator even try and use this API, they will receive the same error message as shown already, which is the unauthorization, the 403 error. These roles are set in the user details service implementation, where we simply assign roles dependent on the user type of the user. So if they're a GP, we'll give them the role of GP. If they're a patient, we'll give them the role of patient. And then if we return our user details, which contains our credentials and roles, and that is how the pre-authorized annotation works. To summarize, users have to be logged in to access any of the APIs, otherwise they'll be redirected to the login page, and when a user uses an API, they will be authorized to ensure that the data they're trying to access or write to is their data or is their account. The reason that I have used authentication over alternatives such as tokens and API keys is mainly because this is very simple to implement due to the fact that it's straight out of the box with Spring Security. Using API keys could be costly because obviously you have to sign up with the OAuth framework. As well as that, it's another reliance on another framework or another reliance on other software to return the keys, whereas this authentication we have here is already in our application. It's just a case of setting it up and using it as we have done.